Good afternoon. Um, I was debating about waiting a little bit, but I think we should get started. Anyway, um, so I'm gonna jump into this. When I started to put this together, I was hoping to be able to go into a lot more detail. Unfortunately, it's a ton of information. So, um, it's going to be fairly high level with the ability to basically reach out to me if you want more in-depth information on any particular section. Um, I um, I do have happy to send everybody a copy of the presentation. Unfortunately, I was trying to figure out how to basically excuse me, take all the registrants email from Zoom so I could just send it to everybody, and I can't figure out how to do that. So if you do want a copy of the presentation, email me. My email information will be on the last slide. It's Candace at Craft Beer Attorney, for those who don't know. And as well, you can email me there as well for more information on any particular area. So that said, I'm going to jump right in to my screen share. Okay. Um, brewery compliance. This is specific to breweries based in California, although there are some things that would overlap with out-of-state breweries. Feel free to ask questions as we're going along, and I will try to answer. I'm watching two screens as I go at them. Oh, and of course, my legal disclaimer that everything in here is general information. If you have a specific legal situation, you should consult a licensed attorney with your specific facts because it does often make a difference. Um, okay, so let's jump into it. We are going to cover TTB, ABC, the FDA, CDTFA, which is the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, calorie cycles, some Secretary of State business items, employment law compliance, I'm going to hit the high points, and then a couple of new things as well. So let's dive on in. So for TTB, to be compliant, you have to keep your licensing, all your information from your license updated. There are record keeping requirements. You have to file either monthly or quarterly, depending on your size, a brewer's report of operations. You have to pay your taxes. Uh, in some cases, you will need formal approval, and in some cases, you'll need a certificate of label approval. So you need to keep your info updated based on from when you submitted your application and things that change. And generally, you have about 30 days to make those changes, and they're pretty serious about that if you take longer. There's no fee, but they will, because I have had this happen, suspend your license until they process the change if you're over 30 days. So if it's an address change, not the location, but the address. Trade name addition. So that's if you're packaging under a different name. So you're contract brewing for someone else and you're putting their name on the package. You have to add that and delete that. If you're altering the premises, most of you probably aren't dealing with bonds right now. If there's construction, contract brewing, your name, extension of your premises, your diagram changes. And the most common one is officers, directors, and stockholders or members, depending. I'd say that is the most common one that needs to get updated and doesn't get updated. And it will bite you in the long run. So pretty important stuff. The records you're required to maintain. Now, these you don't report on anything, but you have to have these records available should TTB come by and want to see them. So a daily record of operations. And I have one thing I've done on these slides is I have listed references. So for these 5 items, those are the details of what you would need to keep. Records of alcohol content, inventory records, unsaleable beer, records of beer concentrates. And again, those are all defined in those reference numbers. But you do have to have those records at your brewery ready to be available for inspection if TTB ever shows up. That said, I've been doing this for 14 years and very few of my clients have ever had TTB show up, but things can change. You do have to file either a monthly or quarterly, and for most of you guys, it's probably quarterly. Brewer's report of operations, that is online, although you can see what the form looks like if you want to download the PDF. And you can file quarterly if you are liable for $50,000 or less in beer tax, excise taxes the preceding calendar year, or if you expect not to be liable for more than that. So that's kind of the rough uh, edge of where they determined, are you filing quarterly or are you filing monthly? And I put a little picture in here because there are a couple of things I wanted to point out. Kind of the big key to this form is you start out with your total amount of beer on hand at the beginning of the quarter. So if you're filing your first report ever, that's going to be 0. And then you're going to put in how much beer you produced by fermentation plus any other liquids added. Then on the top right at number 10, beer removed for consumption or sale. Basically, that means beer that has left your premises, either to go to distributors, either you've self-distributed to retailers, or in a lot of cases, you have moved it to your tap room to sell to your customers. And at that point, you are going to pay the taxes on it. There are a number of other lines in this that we can send more information on if you're interested. But the other one, and I couldn't fit it all on one slide, is the bottom of that form. So you're also going to have the total amount of beer on hand at the end of the quarter. And that number, line 17, is going to be your starting number for the next month. And I definitely have seen a lot of people, because we do filings for a lot of people, and they will send us the numbers, and the numbers don't always match as they should. So you've got to kind of keep this rolling data. And I know a lot of the software programs out there probably provide the service for you as well, but I also know a lot of startups, and when you're in the beginning, don't necessarily have the money to pay for software. But an Excel spreadsheet probably will do us fine. Just keep in mind, to keep your inventory straight, you're going to always start with your prior quarter ending inventory. And then you can go back and amend your reports if you need to. Actually, let me go back a slide. At the top, you can put if this is an amended or original, amended, or final. Final being we're closing the brewery and this is our final report. But you can go back and amend reports as needed. So that actually is pretty helpful. And yeah, I redacted everybody's information. That's my phone number. So as I said, I filed for some clients. So that's kind of my tip on that one. Again, there's more information available on that if needed. You also then need to pay your taxes. If you're filing quarterly, you pay quarterly. And again, it's that same level. If you don't expect to be liable for more than $50,000 in a year, or you weren't liable for more than that the year before. Current tax rate, $3.50 a barrel. And that link at the bottom is actually, it's literally titled Helpful Hints in Preparing Your Excise Tax Return. So it can actually walk you through all those blocks and lines that you need to fill in. So really helpful. And this is what your excise tax return will look like. Again, this one, again, I redacted the personal information. You do have to include a serial number, which is going to be year, and then 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on the quarter. Amount of payment. You basically take that number brought from your brewer's report of operations, whatever this number was, removed for consumption, times 350, and that would be your beer taxes. Again, there's more lines on this too, if you have losses, if there are changes you need to make, but that's the high level piece. Okay, so the formula is a recipe for an alcoholic beverage, ingredients, processes, etc. And sometimes you have to provide a sample to TTB. Most of your products do not require formula approval. However, if you have any ingredients that are not either malt, hops, yeast, and water, or listed on a very long list, of which I can provide you, of exempted ingredients, you are very possibly going to need to get formula approval. And formula approval is for every beer, regardless of whether it is leaving the state or not, because this is basically alcohol's version of the FDA. They want to make sure that you're not putting things in your beer that um, might be harmful to people. So this is basically your kind of check stop on that. You can do it on paper. There is an old form, but that is all. You can also now do it online, and you're not supposed to bottle, sell, or market a product requiring formula until you have that formula approval. Um, Certain products, such as kombucha, always require formula approval. And I believe that if your seltzer does not contain malt, it also will need formula approval. So here's a link at the bottom for more information on formulation and certificate of label approval, known as COLAs. You only need a COLA if you are shipping out of state, and you do need that label approval before you ship out of state. As a matter of fact, many states are going to require you to provide it to them if you are shipping into their state. So you'll need to register for COLAs online to get access. Again, it's an online system. Here is the link to where you would submit those COLAs. And I know you guys aren't be able to, well, you can probably click the links when I send the presentation to you, but you can copy and paste it into your browser. There is also a checklist of mandatory label information that I can provide you, as well as the list of allowable revisions to approved labels. So sometimes if you change something, depending on what it is, you don't necessarily have to go back and get another COLA. TTB does allow some revisions without making you go back through label approval. Label approvals, they're turning it around fairly quickly these days. Actually, both formula approval and label approval, the TTB posts timelines for how quickly those are moving. Formula approval takes a little bit longer. Label approval, I think at the moment it's just a few days. So it's not too much, but again, you need to be thinking ahead of the curve to get these things done and filed and approved before you are ready to sell. Okay, and so as I come to the end of the TTB section, TTB is great, and they have a lot of training tools, videos, webinars, presentations they've done that can go through all this, all the things I just talked about superficially in depth. So you can see and get a real in-depth view of how to do those things. They have reference guides, the video series, and the TTB pre. I spend a lot of time in these two. So really, really helpful. Again, as I mentioned, I can send you more information on any of those TTB areas that you need help with, and TTB can provide you a lot of that information as well. One other thing I did want to mention, as I will point out through this, the number of items of things that we can send you. If you want everything, that's going to take, I don't think I can send everything in one email, because I think the attachments are going to be so large, it's going to prevent that. So if you do think you need everything, let's start with the first things you need, and then we can move forward. But it's going to be a lot of information. So now I'm going to move on to ABC, so the California ABC. Same licensing issues as TTB. You have to keep them current with new information, especially ownership changes. Certain ownership changes are actually going to require new applications. If you have a 50% or more change in ownership, you have to send a full application packet to ABC. So the more you keep them updated along the way, the better you'll be, because inevitably what happens is you'll go to get something you need, then they realize you haven't updated what they already have, and they're going to make you go back and update everything before they'll process anything new. Also, you have to renew your license annually. They send those reminders out about 2 months before it's due, but I've definitely had people miss those, whether I certainly know that I have a whole lot of things in my email. So brand registration, talk about price posting, territorial agreements, responsible beverage server training, and then signage that is required for you to have in your tasting rooms. I already talked a little bit about the licensing, so I'm going to jump to brand registration. You do still need to do to register your brands with ABC. This was put in place to in lieu of label approval a number of years ago. It's a one-page form, super simple. All they want you to put on there is the product name, the style, or beer type, and ABV. That's all you got to put on it. Any beer leaving your premises needs to be brand registered. So even if you're just filling crowlers for people to take home, that's leaving your premises, you have to have brand registration. So that's where you send it to beer brand registration at ABC. They will not send you a response, by the way. You just send it in and you just kind of assume they have it. Keep your copy of the submitted one. The information on that link is at the bottom. Price posting. So we have a newish price posting system. You have to price post everything online now, which I will tell you actually is a lot easier than it was on paper. It was very confusing. So who has to file prices? Manufacturers, so types 1, 23, and 75. Importers, type 9 and 10. Wholesalers, type 17. And all out-of-state beer manufacturers, type 26. So basically anyone who is selling the product to anyone other than a retailer, other than a consumer, has to file prices. How do you do it? You will receive a registration notice from ABC once your license has been issued. That gives you a login. You can add other users into your system. I actually price post for quite a number of my clients. If you don't remember ever receiving a registration notice, you can contact the department. You have to file these prices prior to the first sale of those products. And one thing I've been finding recently is a lot of people, and this probably doesn't apply to most of you guys, but for anyone who is, let's say you're contract brewing with someone out of state, and bringing it back into California for you to sell, that manufacturer, that out-of-state manufacturer, needs to be registered in the price posting system. So they'll have to have that type 26, and they'll have to set the products up in price posting. Only a manufacturer, this is very important, especially for those of you who are contract brewing for other people. Only the manufacturer can set up a product in the price posting system. And when I say that, I mean only someone holding a type 1, type 23, or type 75 can set up a product. Any of those other license types I mentioned before can price post a product. Second note I want to make there is if you are contract brewing for another brewery, you set up the product, but you don't price post it. That is a private contract between you and who you are contracting for. That is not a product that you are selling to the masses. So you do not price post the beer that you are contract brewing for someone else. That party will go in and price post who they are selling it to. How often do you price post? If you're new, then prior to any sale, and then you can amend your sales. You can add, when you add new brands, new types, new package configurations, new can sizes, bottle sizes, any price changes, all of those things, you will need to file a new price. A new price of a brand new product is effective immediately upon upon filing. Amended prices are effective 10 days after filing. There is a way if you're filing to meet a lower competing price, there's a way to make that happen. But more information, price posting is available at the link at the bottom. But you really need to have, make sure you're set up and have access to price post your products. Pretty important stuff. You also in California have to have your territorial agreements on file with ABC. So for most people, that is your distribution agreement where you have them. But you don't actually have to have a whole distribution agreement. It can just be a territory agreement, but that does have to be on file with ABC. Wholesalers basically are not supposed to sell anything until they have a written agreement setting forth territorial limits. And in my opinion, that wholesaler is the one who will put that agreement on file with ABC, as they are the one who can't sell anything without it being there. But good for you to know and to make sure that they're doing what they need to be doing. And all three of those, brand registration, price posting, and territorial agreements, all that information is on the ABC page for price posting. I don't know why they put it all in one spot, but there you go. Okay, so a couple of years ago, ABC enact responsible beverage server training. Anyone serving alcohol in California must go through this training. So any server or manager of servers, you have to register in the RBS portal, take the training for an authorized training provider, and then pass the ABC alcohol server certification exam within 30 days of the training. So register, complete your training, pass the exam. More information on where that RBS portal is at the link at the end, abc.ca.gov, education, RBS. I suspect that there are a lot of people who have not done this because it became mandatory either right before or in the middle of COVID. And yeah, we all had a lot of things going on at that time, but you are still required for it. They are checking on that, and you will need to, especially when you're bringing on new employees, make sure they go through this. Okay, there is signage that the way the ABC website reads, if you look at the bottom, is for retail licensees. However, since your tap room is basically a bar or a restaurant, you should have these same signs as well. So a smoking sign, probably more where it's prohibited than where it's permitted, but if it is permitted anywhere. There is a cancer pregnancy warning about alcohol, penalties for sales to minors, BPA exposure warning. That's a California thing. And some of your localities may have their own requirements for signs that you should have up in your tap room. There are sign companies that you can purchase these from. They sell them as a package. If you need more information on that, let me know. Again, this information is generally directed more at retail licensees, but it does apply to you guys too. So make sure you know about it. Okay. I did go over ABC and TTB pretty quickly, partly because I figured you guys probably know that stuff more so than some of the other things I'm going to touch on. I haven't seen any Q&A questions pop up. I'm kind of keeping my eye to see. I'll just double check, make sure I'm not wrong. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so throw something up there if you'd have a question. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. So as a brewery, you do need to register with the FDA. It's very simple, very quick. And basically, you're just letting them know that you exist. So in this situation where you do not normally, you're not normally considered a food facility, in this particular requirement, you are. And basically, you have to register before you begin manufacturing. You only register once, and then every 2 years you renew that registration, which is basically you log in, check, yes, I'm still here and I'm still doing this, and that's pretty much the end of it. So basically the whole point is just that if anything gets into our food stream, that there is an ability to track things back to where they came from. So minimal effort, doesn't take very long. They don't want a lot of information. It's just one more thing that needs to be on your checklist that you are registered. As well, every brewing facility needs its own registration. So be aware of that too. So registering once for your main facility, if you open a second brewing location, you'll need to register that location as well. So just kind of tie that FDA registration idea into if you need a ABC license and a TTB license, you need to register with the FDA. Oh, and now I do see that there is a question. Oh, jumping back a little bit, which is fine. Beer brand registration. Yeah. So the question is whether or not adding it to the price posting system, isn't that the same as registering? And do you also need to submit the form? Yeah, I kind of feel like they could combine those two things, but no, they are separate and you have to do them separately. I think part of that is because, for example, if you're selling beer off your premises to consumers and growlers, you don't need to price post that. So you don't necessarily put that in the price posting system. So yes, you need to submit that ABC 412 in addition to setting them up in the price posting system. I think the other piece to that is that the price posting system does not ask you for ABV, which is required on the brand registration form 412. That's the other reason I know that you need to still do both. It would be amazing if they would combine those at some point down the road. If I click answer live, ooh, okay, done. Okay, good. I can click on these so that I know I answered them. Sweet. That's very helpful. Okay. That's pretty much it for the FDA. Just remember that you need to do it for every brewing facility. And why am I not? There we go. Okay. The California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. This is who you're actually going to pay your taxes to. The first thing you'll need to do is create a login for yourself. Once you create your login, you can then register a new business activity. So that's the main screen. When you first go to the website, you click on registration options, and this is what pops up. And if you click on create my login, you can go do it. So what do you need CDTFA for? First of all, you need a seller's permit. That will allow you to sell to consumers. That also ties into the main account that you'll file is a sales and use tax account. And this is where you'll pay your sales tax. So when you do go into this form, you have to report both taxable sales. So those are the sales that you make direct to consumers where you are collecting sales tax. And then your non-taxable sales, where you are just selling to someone who's then they're selling onto the consumer. So sales to distributors or retailers will be your non-taxable sales because, for example, the retailers will collect the sales tax on their end. But you will be set up, and that's you do have to file that. If you're not careful, or I should say be careful, because a lot of times so once you set up that account, you have to start filing those returns. And if you set up the account early and file a bunch of zero reports, and actually I should note that, and this is true of TTB as well, once you have the license, even if you're not selling yet, you need to be filing your reports. So you'll have to file zero reports until you have something to file. Question, do you add sales tax to sales to employees? Interesting question. Well, I would say this, if you are selling it to employees, yes. I would say there's probably a way to not pay sales tax to employees. If you're giving them the merchandise or the product, it's not a sale. If you're selling to them, yes, you have to pay the sales tax. I would say this, you could also, however, lower the price of what you sell it to your employees for so that they pay the same amount and sales tax be included. I will say that if you are using, like if you have samples they're giving to influencers or those kind of things, that would not fall into sales, but you would have to somehow work that out within your accounting system, probably as an advertising expense. Now, I will say this though, and we haven't talked about calorie cycles yet, but I do believe that even if you are giving away cans as or bottles, whatever, as promotional tools, you will still have to pay the recycling fee on that. So I'll cover that again when we get to recycling. So last but not least on this one is your beer excise tax. Again, similar to TTB, you are going to pay when it leaves the premises. Now at the same time, the biggest thing for TTB and ABC is to keep your tax paid product separate from your untax paid product. I mean, if you want to pay the taxes before it physically leaves the premises, let's say you've put aside this product, this is going to be what you're selling, the distributor's going to come pick it up. You can file the taxes on that whenever you want and make it tax paid. It's just that many people, and again, I'm not an accountant, but don't want to pay the taxes until they have to. And so they want to put it off. And so they don't want to pay it till the end. Let's see, I'm trying to remember. Did I do a picture for this one? Yes. Okay. So here's the sales and use form. This is just the first page. Part of this, I just wanted to make sure that you could see what the form would look like so you knew you were in the right place. The next screen, I think, is where it breaks up taxable and non-taxable. And then, this is what I was going to. The beer excise tax. And again, these aren't forms. This is online forms. So you're following these online. You do have to break these down by kegs and packaged beer. But the nice thing is that you're going to put the same, you're going to put it in as barrels, but California taxes you in gallons. The system does the math. So you're going to put in the barrels, and it should match to some extent your TTB. And don't necessarily, I guess if you're doing the monthly TTB form, you are breaking it out kegs and packaging on that form. On the quarterly one, you're not. So these references are not to the quarterly report, but to the monthly. Anyway, but this will have a lot of the same information that you're putting into your TTB report. California doesn't track your production, however. You're just letting them know what beer was removed from the premises. But you do have to break it down between kegs and other packaged. And they're not going to track inventory on beginning and at the end of the quarter. CDTFA also has lots of helpful tutorials specifically on how to file a beer manufacturer tax return, for example, as well as that's just the one I blew out. There's ones under sales and use tax. They do, I think I see one almost quarterly. They'll do webinars on how to file sales and use tax. So if you keep your eyes open, you can definitely find information on how to do these yourself as well. Okay, calorie cycles. This one is a little confusing because they look at a brewery. You are both a beverage manufacturer and a distributor. So you're going to have two accounts with calorie cycles. You will have one account as a beverage manufacturer, which basically is what you're only going to report on that one is product you have filled into containers. And currently, aluminum is not, as a manufacturer putting liquid in aluminum, there's no fee. If you are still bottling, there is a fee. So if you are bottling, you need to be filing that beverage manufacturer report. If you are not at the moment, you don't really have to file the report, or you're going to file a zero report. However, distribution reports you do have to file because you are selling beverages in these containers and you have to account for that. Now, you're not going to pay if you are selling it to a distributor. You don't have to pay for those because they're going to pay for those. Whoever's the tail end before the retailer is going to pay the distributor price. So when you file your Calorie Cycles distributor reports, you are accounting for any cans that you sold to consumers direct. So internet sales, out of your tap room, any cans you sold to your retailer. So you self-distributed to a retailer, cans that you gave away to influencers as advertising that you took home. You've got to account for all those cans. But you would not include anything you sold to an actual distributor. And I know it's confusing, but yeah. Anyway, you also need to make sure that you have, and I believe your can manufacturers are probably taking care of this for you, but the labeling on your product about Cal Recycles, CRV. When you register with Cal Recycles, they're going to want a copy of either your label or your can lid, basically where you have that information listed. And then, of course, they'll let you know if it's an issue, so, or if there's a problem. But that is Cal Recycles. You can register online. You can register on a form. And once you register, they will reach out to you and help determine, are you a manufacturer and or distributor? Trust me, I think you guys are both. But if you need more information, there's a link at the bottom. And then this is a very small, sorry, hard to see. This is the manufacturer report. So anything that you manufactured in a container, and you basically click this drop down on what container type, and then it will pop up with what the fee is, and then you put the number, and it hits calculate. And this one literally is the number of units, the number of bottles, the number of cans. It's not volume. And then the distributor report is under 24 ounces and over 24 ounces. So it does account for size. So, you know, most of you are probably the under 24 ounces, but if you have the large growlers, those would fall here. And by the way, if anyone is still using glass growlers, those don't really count because they're reusable. This is for packaging that is not reusable. Again, you'd enter your accounts, you hit calculate, and it tells you what you owe. Okay, so I'm gonna stop for a second. See, it's already been 40 minutes. And I have about 10 slides left, but this is all that's the biggest stuff, the most important, the most common that you're going to run into on a, well, quarter to quarter basis. So, okay. I'm going to keep going, and then you guys can either bombard me at the end or bombard me with emails to send you more information than you ever wanted. So for business compliance, you most likely need a local business license, and that's your locality, and they all want different information. And I went in to file one today for a client, and of course I had to email them for like, okay, I need these 3 kind of random pieces of information that I didn't know I would need. So, but that's one of the early things you'll do, and usually pretty straightforward. Make sure if you have an entity, which I'm guessing most of you do have to file an annual statement of information. So once a year, state wants to know who's still running the company. Is it the same people? And if it's exactly the same, you pretty much click a box and say nothing has changed. You pay your $20 and you're good. If you have had managers or directors or officers change, that's when you'll enter that information. And that's pretty much that. That said, you also will have an annual taxes to the Franchise Tax Board. So whether you're an LLC or an S Corp, you're going to have, you will have a minimum entity tax of $800 regardless of how much money you've made that year. If your taxes are more than that, then obviously that 800 doesn't matter, but just make sure that you know about that, and that is a separate thing. And I'll tell you, it's funny because people always come to me about it, and I don't get notices about, even when I create the business, those notices are going to go to the company and go to you. You're going to get a ton of mail that you need to make sure that you see. So that's a big one. And if you don't pay it, they will come after you, and they'll suspend your ability to do business in the state, and it can get really ugly. Oh, which actually reminds me, I knew there was something I was going to say earlier. On the CDTFA, sales and use tax, as well as beer excise tax, and Cal Recycles will do it as well. If you file a bunch of zero reports because you haven't started opening yet, they may change your how often that you have to file. So overall, if your numbers are really low and you're not paying much money, they're not going to make you file monthly. They may make you file quarterly. And then if your quarterly payments are really low, they may just say, hey, you know what? You can just pay annually. And that goes for sales and use tax, excise tax, or cow recycles. But I warn you, that can be really dangerous if you were, let's say you were quarterly and filing low because you hadn't opened yet. And so they switch your filing to annually and then you open, because you may find yourself at the end of the year owing $100,000 in sales tax, which hopefully you saved going along. But I've definitely seen people get in trouble because it didn't get paid and they were on an annual filing and they suddenly had a huge tax bill. So just keep that in mind. All three of those will put you on an annual filing schedule, and just make sure if they do that you're ready for that at the end. So, sorry, I meant to say that earlier. Make sure that if you are not operating under your entity name, that you are filing a doing business as a DBA, fictitious business name, same thing, just depends on where you are. That is something that you file with your county or city. It has to be recorded by the county recorder. It has to be published in a newspaper, as antiquated as that seems. All of which you can set up online, which is nice. But for example, especially when you're contract brewing for someone who wants it under their name, that is a document that needs to be filed and would need to be filed with TTB when you're doing that. So that can be important. And brand new, and I read up about it this morning and I still don't completely understand it, but starting next year, there is going to be something called beneficial ownership reporting. And I did a whole slide just for this. If you are an LLC or a corporation, everyone on this podcast is most likely going to file. The exempt industries, I believe, are industries that already make these kind of filings, but it's like insurance and banking, those kind of that kind of industry. And basically, a beneficial owner is anyone who directly or indirectly exercises substantial control over a company, or owns or controls at least 25% of the ownership interests of a company. Okay, so basically my understanding of this is a way that the feds are looking for potential money laundering situations. They want to make sure that they know who really owns and is really running a company. If you existed prior to January 1 of this year, you will have a full year to file. So you'll have a full year. And by the way, you can't file before January, and they don't even have the system set up yet. They are creating a filing system. They will provide guidance at that link that I put in there. And you can certainly contact your business attorney if you have further questions. This is something that I literally just have started seeing in my feeds. So I think it's going to be very much like your statement of information, just on a federal level, letting them know who is running your company, who owns your company. Any companies formed after January 1, so for new companies going forward, it'll have 30 days to file. Again, very similar to a statement of information. I think in California we have 90 days, but similar situation. But if you see this pop up, don't freak out. I think it's gonna be pretty basic. Assume that you will need to file it. But again, it looks like it's gonna be very, very similar to a statement of information. Okay. I'm laughing because we have 15 minutes left and I just got to employment. I'm gonna skim through these slides because, again, most of this you probably already know. A lot of this I just want to put on the slide so you have this as a checklist. So the big one that I think everyone needs to be aware of is that all companies have to provide sexual harassment prevention training. Well, all companies with 5 or more employees. Supervisors need 2 hours. All other employees get 1 hour within 6 months of taking their position. Retrain every 2 years. There are tons of courses available online that people come in. This is another one that went into place right before COVID, so I'm guessing a lot of people may not be current, but again, this is a really important one to make sure you have in place. Minimum wage is going up. You probably already know that, but just a reminder, there is no more small business, larger business. It's one price for everybody. $16 an hour as of January 1st. Don't forget that also means overtime increases, and several localities have their own minimum wage rates separate from this. Reminder two, when minimum wage goes up, the minimum salary increases. So anyone, the minimum salary in California, oh, I'm sorry, it says 22 at the top. I forgot to change that to 24. Is going to be $66,560. So anyone that you have as a salaried employee, that is the minimum as of January 1 that they have to make. This one I did change to 23. These are the localities with their own minimum wage ordinance. So if you're in one of these places or you have employees in one of these places, your minimum wage is likely going to be different. However, Hayward, Novato, and Sonoma do have small employer exceptions. So their locality has two different levels depending on your size. So I can certainly answer specific questions about those offline. As of last year, if your company does not have a retirement plan and you have 5 or more employees, you have to register with Cal Savers. It's a state retirement savings plan. So again, another thing that I think got lost in COVID time. So just a reminder. Okay, I have a list of all the employment policies you are required to have in writing. Those first 5, the 4 of the first 5, you actually have to hand new employees when they start. So you really have to have these. You don't have to have a handbook, but you have to have these policies in writing provided to your employees. 5 or more employees, pregnancy, disability leave, CFRA, 50 or more, which is probably not many of you, if any, family, the federal FMLA. So there are even more policies, by the way, that you are required to provide in action, but you don't have to put them in writing and hand them to people. So just be aware of that as well. Required postings. I'm not going to read through all of these because, as you probably, sure most of you know, you can purchase one poster that has all these policies on them. So you don't have to worry about posting them individually. And most of you probably purchase those from, there's a lot of HR companies that provide them. Let me know if you have questions on that. And they do change virtually every year, and definitely you're going to need a new one this year if for minimum wage, if nothing else. There are required pamphlets that you are required to give new employees. These also, again, you can purchase from an HR company. You can download a paper version from the EDD site. I'm sorry, I should have put that on there. But you are required by law to physically print these and hand them to people. So again, there's 6 here. Let me know if you need help with those. The last couple of things I want to touch on is an injury and illness prevention program. All employers in California must create and have available an effective written injury illness prevention program, which is a general plan to keep your workforce free from work-related injuries and illnesses. Obviously, during COVID, there's a lot of focus on this, and a lot of it went to COVID regulations and what to do. But in general, you need this, period, a written plan, training requirements, there are record-keeping requirements, and there are still a few things I think that California wants you to put in there regarding COVID, obviously not nearly as much as it was a couple of years ago. I can send you more information on that as well. And then the last thing I want to touch on, because I know a lot of people have received fun letters from lawyers about ADA website violations. As a business, you must provide people with disabilities an equal opportunity to access the goods or services that you offer. This is Title III of the ADA. And again, there's a link at the bottom. So there are specific requirements for businesses that are open to the public. And I've listed these here. Again, I'm going fast because I want to leave time for questions. Service animals, even if you have a no pets policy, for example, physical accessibility when building or altering a building, you must make reasonable modifications. And I know that's a very gray, fuzzy phrase, but Basically, if you have a no pets policy, you allow people to service animals. That would be a reasonable modification in your policy. Um, that said, when it comes to this website stuff, because that's relatively new, there's not a lot that's clear. What I would tell you is I would make sure your website is up to the minimum requirements. So basically, which I think to some extent is things like if you have pictures on your website, someone who is blind and accessing that would get a verbal description of the picture, and vice versa. If you have um, music, voice, sound on your website for deaf people, there would be some sort of visual um, interpretation. So you don't need to spend the $20,000 necessarily to have the perfect ADA accessible website, but you want to do as much as you possibly can to help kind of avoid the potential liability from some of these predatory law firms, I'll say, that are out there. Okay. We have 8 minutes left. I'm happy to stay on longer. I'm guessing a lot of you are at lunch. So, questions. And actually, I will turn off the screen share so you can see me. If anyone has questions, you can put them in the chat. You can raise your hand. Happy to answer anything. Again, if you want more information on any of those topics, email me, Candace, CANDACE @craftbeerattorney.com. If you just want to copy the presentation, you can email me, or you can email Jen, JENN, @craftbeerattorney.com. I'll make sure she's got the presentation, so she can send that out. If you want more information on any of those numerous topics I touched on, I'm happy to forward that as well. I know I went really fast. So far, I haven't seen any other questions than the couple that came up. Okay. If nobody else has any questions, like I said, I'll hang on a little longer. I appreciate you guys coming in. I hope this was helpful. Planning to do more presentations like this. So if there's anything you do want to hear about that you'd like a full presentation about, let me know. For beneficial ownership reporting, would a spouse fall under this reporting? In California, yes, because in California is a community property state. So whatever you own, your spouse owns half of. So that would make them an indirect owner. So I suspect that, yes, you would have to put your spouse. Again, because it's a federal reporting requirement, I believe in California, your spouse would be considered an indirect owner. ABC definitely does, which is why your spouse always has to also fill out the forms that we do. They'll probably give more information on the BOI, but I would assume if you live in a community property state, yes. Thank you, Shannon.